Hello and welcome back to the Natural Wellness Tips Podcast. This is your host, Dr. Jennifer Shaw. So excited to be here with you today. Today I have another incredible guest. I'm going to introduce you to Erin Thomas in just a moment. But before I do that, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for coming to the podcast, taking the time to listen, learning, growing as a person. I hope that you get some amazing value out of today's episode. If you haven't connected me with me on Instagram yet, head over to Instagram, Natural Wellness Tips. Drop into my DM. Please say hello. I would love to hear from you. And wherever you are listening, YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, make sure you subscribe so you get notified each week when I drop a new episode. Let me introduce you to Erin Thomas. He is joining us today from Durango, Colorado. Erin and I met on this really awesome app called Clubhouse, which is an audio app where we just dive into real conversations. It's amazing because you don't have that barrier of video over on Clubhouse. So people show up while they're doing dishes or getting ready for the day, and they just really, we get into it. We have deep, amazing, incredible conversations. And when I was talking to Erin on Clubhouse, I was like, we have to have this conversation on a podcast. So here he is today. He is a psychotherapist and meditation teacher who also teaches groups how to bring mindfulness into everyday relating. Trained in the emerging field of somatic psychotherapy, his work goes beyond traditional talk-centered approach by working with mindfulness and the body to help people heal the past in the present, so they can create the life and relationships they really want. His mission is to be an ambassador of play and a guide helping people live their embodied presence. So welcome to the podcast, Erin.
Thanks, Jennifer. Excited to be here.
Yeah, I am excited to have you. Like I said, our conversations have always been so incredible. And we just have so much alignment in how we think about life and the experiences we've had and the way we process things. So I know this is going to be an incredible conversation. And, you know, one of the things that really inspired me was this kind of broken road and journey that you've been on to become the man that you are today, to help people, right? It's not something that you woke up when you were like 16, like, this is what I'm going to do with my life. Like, you experienced life and have evolved and gained these trainings and things along the way to make you who you are now. And I'd love for you to share a little bit about that journey with my listeners.
Yeah, interesting the way you described it as a broken road sort of thing. It really did feel like the road less traveled. I grew up in Wisconsin and was in a really kind of conventional box of in so many ways, and just stumbled into counterculture living by being in university and getting roped into taking a semester off to go be a lift operator in a ski resort in Colorado, and waking up to wow, there are people who are doing this whole thing differently. They're organizing their life around play, and they really seem to have a high value for living close to nature and really celebrating life, as opposed to what I was staring down of conventional careers and accumulation and just kind of this cookie cut living. And it really opened up an entire other trajectory for me to live that started off in really normalizing that play can be something that you can organize your life around and put at the center. And from there, I think just moving from the Midwest to the West, I was starting to be exposed to things like alternative medicine, which got me into in my early 20s to becoming a massage therapist. And from there, having me work in health clubs as a massage therapist to introduce me to access to yoga classes and getting into yoga. And then stumbling into like, oh, wow, you can go to places where you just hang out for 30 days and do yoga all the time. Like, this is the mid 90s. It wasn't on every street corner. This was like, still fringe stuff, and getting to get an opportunity to do that. And then discovering human potential, like putting together farm to table eating, people living in conscious community, really working hard to actualize their potential as humans, and then also doing yoga and meditation like every day for 30 days, just waking me up to a whole paradigm shift around what's possible in human living, and having that change again the trajectory of my life, not only counterculture but now human potential, and going deep down the rabbit hole of yoga and trying to study with the best people on the planet and getting immersed in that. And then through that journey, having the seeds of meditation being planted in me, and that evolving into me stumbling into 10-day Vipassana retreat, and then realizing in terms of human potential, it's like just discovering human potential. Like if I'm living in LA and full human potential is like New York, like, okay, I'm now walking towards New York. That's cool. And then finding yoga and going, oh, wait, this is like a bicycle, so much more efficient. And then getting into meditation and going, my God, a jet plane. Good Lord, like, wow. And then having, meditation really quicken that journey and deepen that journey. And then having that also turn me on to relational living, of working in ski towns. It's seasonal work, right? Which allowed me 2 seasons of the year, spring and fall, to go immerse in my passions and in human potential endeavors, and also adventure travel. And from that, really getting to hone in on my tribe of people and the relational high side of really being around like-minded people. And all of that accumulating over years of yoga and meditation orientation and play-oriented living, to come to a place of, okay, relational development, how does that work? And getting myself in 2008 to go live at a retreat center known as Kripalu out in the East Coast. There's a massive kind of beehive of retreat center where there's 600 people at any given time in the building, and spending a year living in that place and just getting a crash course in relational communal living, and having that springboard into a few years later wanting a more grounded version of it and moving to Boulder, Colorado to be around conscious community, which is kind of everywhere in that town. And getting into combining meditation in present moment, kind of relating in being with a small group of people who really geeked out on that. And we developed a method of how to really bring that in, how to strengthen the muscle of bringing the present moment into relating in a real way. And that snowballing into a community of people, of practitioners who really were using it as their own source for socializing and source of like being a part of belonging to something, which then stumbled me into the work that I do now, which is a practitioner of this mindfulness-based body-centered psychotherapy that's known as the hakomi method, which really ended up being the accumulation of everything I had been into up in that point, and stumbling into it and going, wait a minute, like you're using mindfulness primarily as the tool along with the body and how things occur in the body in real time, combined with the psychodramatic method of, the model of working with the formative impressions we have in childhood that actually end up being the operating system for how we do life. And that those are the primary tools that we're going to access that unconscious operating system and work with it. And it's highly effectual. Like you can do that. You can do that for a living, and just pinch me. And then being wholeheartedly in it, and it giving me not only a cumulative sort of one-stop shop approach to doing all these things that I was into, but also giving me what I was longing for, which is working people in a more entrenched way, like getting to access depth. As prior to that, I was mostly doing massage therapy and teaching yoga, and in doing it in a ski town, most people wanted, and you can appreciate this, like just to help them open their hamstrings and
I just
recover
want to
from
feel
yoga.
better after a day on the slopes.
Yeah, exactly. And there's nothing wrong with that. I geeked out on that. I love that, but I was always longing for more depth. And Hakomi allowed me to access that. And so that's kind of the quick of how I came to be where I am today doing this work.
I love it. I think your story is so important because it gives so much validity to what you do, because it's not just like I learned this and it was cool, so I teach it. It's like, oh, I learned life and this embodies it. And now it's a vessel in which I use to help others. And I think that's really, really powerful. So when I was recovering and working through and healing from my marriage and coming to terms with the codependency of the marriage and the emotional abuse and just all the things that had happened and kind of looking at it from like the bird's eye view and saying like, okay, what do I do from here? One of the most important things for me was to actually step into my body in the now and feel what emotions were coming up for me and how they were coming up for me, right? And for many years of my life, I used wine to not feel those feelings and to push them down. And a year after I had left my ex-husband, I decided that alcohol didn't serve a place in my life, and I stopped drinking. And that was when I really had to feel. And I chose to. I was blessed to feel and to step into what happened in my body. And I learned a lot about this. So I would love for you to explain, for somebody who just hears these two words of somatic psychotherapy and be like, that sounds scary and intimidating. What is it?
Yeah, yeah, great question. And I love how you just described your own discovery of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so what it is, somatic is just kind of, you could really be distilled down into just the body. It's just a fancy way of talking about the body, the sensations in the body, feelings, emotions, everything that is internalized. And it's really where experience happens for the most part, right? So we have our minds, our drivers, and in the West, it's so how we orient to living so often. And then what's below the neck tends to be a little bit discounted unless it's pleasure oriented, right? Unless it's a good, happy orientation, we tend to not want to hang out there. And for good reason, there's kind of a practical nature to that, right? Like if that's where we experience the uncomfortability of shame and and humiliation and just some of those really just icky things that we completely don't gravitate towards, right? And that's where they live. It just makes easy sense that, okay, well, let's just not hang out there. And it usually, like reflecting back to your story, it's usually where people need pretty strong reason and motivation to actually turn towards that because they're suffering in life to a point. That usually is the motivator that gets people to like be willing and open to like, okay, you tell me I have to turn towards that, well, it seems that the circumstances in my life, that seems to be a better prospect, is actually turning towards it. But it's nothing that people inherently just do out of just some principle of like, well, I'm just going to better myself, so I'll turn towards it. So, and to get back to your question then, so how it works is really, and I found this with meditation too, it's a familiarization game.
Yes.
Yes, you're familiarizing with how you occur, period.
Mm-hmm.
And what an emotion, like what happens in the body when you feel sad, right? So if you just look at something like sadness, you might notice, and this is kind of the work I do, one of the first stages is like, okay, what's occurring for you now? Well, I feel kind of a lump in my throat, right? And that we interpret, it goes up to the head and like, okay, I'm feeling sad. Well, the actual emotion is the event that's happening. It's energy in motion. Energy is coagulating in the throat. It's giving you this experience. But generally speaking, we have the physical, but we go up to the head for a reference point on what's happening. It's all head driven. So this is bringing us down into the body to have a direct relationship with occurrence.
Mm-hmm.
And, when people say, the thing of like, feel the fear, but do it anyway.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Easy to say and easy to comprehend. But when you have, the somatic experience of chest tightening,
Yeah.
and heat rising up in the chest, and however it's occurring to you, it's not so easy to just go, oh, what, feel the fear and do it anyway. You know what I mean? But one of the side effects of somatic psychotherapy is just familiarizing with the territory. So now it's more known to you. It's more normalized. Oh, that's just my chest tightening, my stomach clenching. You know what I mean? Which sounds weird if you're not used to it and you don't have like this familiarization of like, oh, my body is just reacting to what it perceives as threat, which is a thing it's been doing for thousands of years, right? It's the natural mammalian response to what appears to be threat. It's how we survived. We did it, and there was a tiger around. We got the hell out of there. Like, thank you, body.
Yeah.
But
Thanks for the heads up.
world as much. We don't live in what is perceived threat isn't actually threat. So we're getting an opportunity to rewire in a particular way that all of this, if we just get to know it, it's so much more workable. And now we gain choice.
And it
Yeah.
comes down to awareness, right? What you're saying is it comes down to being familiar and aware with these feelings, with this process. And that was something I really learned as I healed from my trauma. And guys, trauma doesn't have to be huge things. It could be like an incident of like it could be very little. It could be a very little thing that has imprinted in your body. It does not have to be emotional abuse or getting hit by a car like I did. It could be small, whatever that situation was that imprinted in you. You have to take that step back, or you get to now when you become aware of the way our body processes these. And that's what I started to get to, was I started to recognize what I felt like when I was triggered. So sometimes I, even to this day, notice, I'm like, ooh, what just triggered me? Because I'm feeling the heart racing. I'm feeling the lungs constrict. I'm feeling the like sweaty palms. And I'm like, that frustrated thought, that like, convoluted thought of negative spiraling. I'm like, ooh, wait, take a step back. What triggered me? And then because I feel it and I know that I was triggered, I'm now able to take a step back and figure out what that trigger was. And it's interesting, even my partner can now notice, and he's like, hey, are you doing okay? You seem to be triggered. What's going on? And he can notice it. He can't necessarily know exactly what's happening, but he can start to see it in me. And it's a beautiful thing, because now we both have this awareness around it. And when we have awareness, we can start to create change through conversation, through moving out of a situation, through, just shifting the way that situations are perceived by us. And I think that's something that we are missing so much in our day and age. Like, even talk therapy is great. You go to talk therapy, you can talk things out. But much of the time it's like, okay, like keep working on what you're working on, and then you go home. Whereas like when you have somatic work like you do, it's like, okay, I want you to journal about what you feel like when those feelings come up. Where do you feel it? What's the sensation? Like, I want you to really pay attention. And like you said, like sadness, is it in your throat? Yeah, it's always in my throat. It's always right here. And it's like that, oh, I'm going to cry kind of thing, right? But getting that awareness around it is kind of, it's like keys to life, I think.
Yeah. And in the familiarization, like in somatic sessions in the hakomi method that I practice, it's very experiential. So we're working with it almost exclusively. I mean, the first few sessions, you have to get to know someone. So there's a lot of talking and orienting. And then it's like, okay, let's start working with mindfulness throughout the entire session. So it really ends up being this assisted self-study where you're learning about yourself in real time, because then the somatic experiencing is known to you experientially. So it's not just about like thinking about other times when you feel that way. It's actually having the real-time experience to learn. So when it occurs again, it's been imprinted from actual experiencing. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Not so much to talking about it in the past or the future. It's coming from being informed from the direct experiencing as it occurs. So like you said, next time the throat comes up, you're with the experience you're having, and then you're gaining choice about how you want to deal with it. And what's underneath that, what accompanies that is that core processing, right? Or that core operating system. Yeah. So like, for example, there might be, like so many people have got a message early in life, like it's not okay to have needs. Right. And that ends up like really shaping how they do life, right? Mm-hmm. Interferes with boundaries, interferes with like things they want to go after in life, and so on and so forth. And so that can come up in a visceral, physical way, right? You're suddenly in a situation where you need to ask for something, and then suddenly the body goes, it's not okay. It's not okay. So you're having the physical experience, but there might be also a mental, like a narrative in your head that accompanies that. We can't, that's not good. And it's discovering both and then working with both, right? And the way that we work with the body to handle that piece is the body, when you turn towards the body and allow it, almost as its own entity, if you've become a follower using awareness, like you said, to what the body's impulse is, you discover right quick that it actually holds every single thing that's ever happened to you. The imprints are here, right? So if I say to you, and in hakomi, we use what we call experiments to kind of start to tease out how you are holding and what those core things are for you.
Mm.
So what we would do, like if we were in a moment is of a session, I might be like, Jennifer, so I'm going to ask you to just kind of go internal and just be with yourself in that mindful way, like you mentioned, just with that awareness. And then I'm going to offer you some words, and I just want you to notice what occurs within any part of your system. Could be thoughts that arise, could be a voice in your head, could be somatic, could be whatever, but really just allowing it, right? And that's a skill that you kind of acquire over time, is true allowing. So if I were to offer you the words like, it's okay to have needs. And so it seems like you're there. So like, do you notice anything when you hear those words?
I felt this immense peace wash over me. And it's interesting because that's something I've worked with really hard. I've struggled with my entire life. I was kind of told I didn't need help. So I learned that it was not okay for me to ask for help and that I didn't have needs outside of like what I could provide for myself. So now I have this like, it's okay. It's okay to have needs. You said it and it brought peace to me. Whereas
Yes.
I can promise you that if you had said that statement to me 6 months ago, it would have caused like a clenching in my chest.
Right. But there's data no matter what. That's the
Mhm.
thing, is what we're learning about you. And that was just a random occurrence. Like
Yeah.
if you were telling me about what you're struggling with, I might have a hypothesis about, oh, maybe a core belief is this. And I was taking a random one. But that even tells me like I lobbed over some words and they land in you in a positive way. Well, that's data. So now we can shift and go in maybe a different direction, because that lands, that's nourishment to you now. That's great. So it's constantly being informed by what we're discovering in the moment. It's not running simply on a theory or a technique that A goes to B and then therefore C and therefore D, which is part of the reason I love it, because it's so organic in its unfoldment and allows the moment to inform us about where we go next and what's true for you. And then a map emerges,
Mhm.
not from theory and analysis so much as what we're discovering in real time
Yeah.
about who you are
Yeah.
and what's driving you.
So what's something someone could do for themselves in the moment when they're recognizing that a certain emotion or situation is causing, let's just say specifically like anxiety for them. If they're in that moment, and maybe it's so yeah, there's things that like irrationally causing anxiety, right? But it's something like irrational in a sense of like, it's not really going to cause you any harm. It's just because of your past, you've had this patterning where you're like, so for let me give this example. Like getting into a relationship, obviously, after coming out of an emotional one, caused me anxiety. It caused me overwhelm, and it was hard for me to open up to. What are some like quick in the moment things that you can say to somebody that's like, when you see this patterning and you're working on awareness around it, what are some things that they can shift or work through for themselves before they come and work higher level with someone like you?
Uh-huh. To be dead honest with you, I think it's going to fall back into kind of a lot of the things that are being propagated right now. Like, how can you quiet the noise in your system enough to actually start to familiarize with what's here? So if you're in that heightened state of anxiety, nothing's going to be possible, right? So that has to be addressed first.
Yeah.
Right. So from a somatic level, it's just addressing what's here right now in a practical sense. If you're totally stirred up, okay, that's the first thing to hit, right? Yeah. But from there, if you can get yourself in Hakomi's really big on resourcing. So finding those things that actually help you get more regulated. And from that place, then you can start to get curious about what's happening. So really super quick things, it's going to be self-awareness, which is also cultivated.
Yeah.
It's hard to tell somebody just straight up like, well, just be self-aware. You know?
Just be self-aware. Just get that, snap your fingers. It's easy. It takes work, right? It takes meditation and mindfulness practices, and it takes, time and energy, and it takes work. to get to that awareness, right? The other morning I woke up and I had a conversation right before bed that triggered me, just because it brought up a lot of fears for me. And I woke up that morning and I had a big to-do list, and I was like, you're useless right now. Like, in the sense of that to-do list and you are not going to be friends. Like, you need to take care of you. And I took a step back and I took my adaptive capsules, my doTERRA adaptive capsules that are like for stress and anxiety. So I took one of those. I popped some calming oils in the diffuser. I made a nice cup of tea. I did a long meditation. I listened to some binaural beat neuro tools. I took a long bath with even more adaptive in it. And I read a book. And I gave myself 2 hours. I didn't have a time limit on it, but that's what I needed. I needed 2 hours. I got out of that bath. I made a deliciously nourishing breakfast. And by the time I was done with taking care of myself, me and that to-do list crushed the day. But if I had gone into that to-do list on that scattered, anxious, overwhelmed mind, nothing would have gotten done.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And another thing that I could offer in that quick fix kind of way is when you're really dysregulated and kind of disassociating, like there's a thing of just coming back into the body, and 5 things you can do. So really doing a quick 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 5 things, just sitting there. And when you're triggered and starting to like spin off, and spiral, 5 things that you see. Have you done this before? Like 5 things you see in the room.
No.
Just right.
I love that.
4 things that you hear. Things that you smell. Yeah. And 2 things that you feel, and 1 thing that you are grateful for. And just that simple sequence allows you to re-embody, and it's really just kind of a classic trick for when people really start to disassociate.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I love that. I love it. Thank you. And I think it's important that we do take tools from these conversations that we can put into play right in the moment. And then if we're resonating with them, then we can, seek that greater support through a practitioner like you, which is just beautiful.
Yeah.
I would love to carry on this conversation, but I am going to wrap up for the podcast's sake, because I try to stay around that 30 minutes for my listeners because they know it. But we'll have to do it again. I know we'll carry it on, but I want to dive into my rapid fire questions. Are you ready for them, Aaron?
Go for it.
Okay. Number 1 question. What is your top health and wellness tip for the listeners?
I think the thing I would say is like number 2 on that list is a tie between like 4 things, like sleep hygiene, diet, and what else? Well, let's just say those 2. Nice tie between those 2. And number 1 is cultivate the lost art of play.
Yay.
Like I'm becoming more of an advocate for that as I step out beyond my little limited world of where I hang out, where people do play a lot. And it's so valuable. And I'm not talking about competitive play, like play. And that's where it's the lost art, And I've been in cultures, Asia comes to mind, where people still have their inner child alive and well. And it pops through now and again. And they really still have this ability to let their hair down and lose themselves in the moment of just whimsy, imaginative, relating to whatever's here in a way that just is expressive of joy and, playfulness.
So powerful. And it is forgotten. My boyfriend last weekend met with a friend of his and like a meetup, and they had a Nerf gun fight.
Exactly.
Grown men, Nerf gun fight. It was so much, they had so much fun. But like I get together with my friends every weekend and we literally like do somersaults and handstands like kids every weekend on the beach. It's like we play and have fun, look silly, get dirty, like have a good time, laugh more than you don't. Like it's just, I think you're right. It's a lost art, and we need to normalize the fact that we should always be playing.
Yes. And the last thing I would add to that too, when I was in my 20s, I got obsessed with meeting couples who were still like in love 40 years into their marriage. And I'd corner them and I'd be like, what's your secret? And after talking to a lot of couples, I found out 2 things. Number 1, respect.
Yeah.
like dignity and respect, and that carried through. And the second one was that they both shared an ability to play well together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's
Yeah.
important. It's
Yeah.
important for sure. Yep. I love that. Okay. What is one thing that you struggle with? I know people think because we're, teaching health and wellness that we're perfect. What is something that you struggle with consistency in?
Just anything in life or health wise or
Anything, whatever comes up for you.
yeah. It's strange. This seems like a small thing, but it's actually it's showing up more and more in my life. I struggle with sunscreen.
That's a
It,
big one.
it's so obvious. I just never really got into it. I live at high altitude my whole adult life, and it's dry and the sun is intense up here. And now, pushing 48, I'm like, oh.
So that's why I was supposed to wear sunscreen.
Yeah, and how important it really is. But it's just old habits die hard. And I've got to turn that one around. I'm
Yeah.
still, so I'm hoping to improve.
Yeah. Speaking of, I have some sunburn on my shoulders this weekend from not putting sunblock on. So I feel you on that. Definitely
Right.
something to struggle with. What are you most excited about in life right now, Aaron?
What I'm excited about right now, I think it's what we've been speaking about. Me and my larger umbrella of offerings is, I call it the Soul Ride, and that's also my website, thesoulride.com. And it's going to envelop meditation teaching and this sort of somatic work, and also adventure travel immersive retreats where I can take people where we play, but we also dive into like meditation immersion.
Owen
Over
and
the,
I will be there. Let's go. Let me know when you got your first one. Those
yeah,
are all
yeah.
our favorite things.
Well, after you guys, do your own nomadic thing, maybe I'll be ready to offer it. You have
We're
your
here for it. We'll catch flights. That sounds amazing.
yeah, but
We need more of that.
yeah, and it really gets me to pop out of bed in the morning and be excited about the direction I'm headed.
I love it. I love it. Okay, selfish question. What is your favorite book that you want to recommend to everybody?
Well, let's see. Recommend. I'm in love with this book called "In Love with the World: A Monk's Journey Through the Bardos of Living and Dying" by a monk named Mingyur Rinpoche. And it's an incredible book. He's an incredible author. He had a bestseller called The Joy of Living.
Mm-hmm.
He's a monk who comes from really esteemed lineage of Indo-Tibetan Buddhism. His whole life, he was basically treated like a prince because of who his father was and who he was recognized to be as an incarnate Lama. He, as an adult, got tremendous responsibility to be in charge of monasteries. He became a global teacher. And in 2011, with all of that, he snuck out the front gate of his monastery late at night and did a homeless wandering retreat for 3 years, disappeared, and completely became homeless as a way to really put, as he says, more wood on the fire towards his own journey of self-discovery.
Mm.
And the book is a tremendous account of the first 2 months of his journey. And it's so candid. It is so beautiful in how real and humanistic you get to peer into his world. I just never really experienced monastics. I didn't think they experienced a lot of what you and I can maybe relate to and experience. And also he weaves in just tremendous teachings
Love
in
it.
the middle of it. And I'm obsessed with it. I'm so obsessed with it. I got the book a year ago and I'm titrating reading it.
Mm.
I don't want to finish it.
I don't
So
want this to be over.
it is. It's really true. So that's the book I would recommend. I don't think you have to be into meditation or Buddhism to appreciate it.
Cool.
It's so well written. Yeah.
Love it. Well, I'll definitely check it out. Thank you so much for the recommendation. And where can people find you?
Where they can find me, I would say www.thesoulride.com is my website, and that has information of who I am and my offerings and how to get a hold of me. I think that's really the best stop.
Awesome. And Aaron's over on Instagram too at the Soul Ride, just at the Soul Ride. So you can check him out over there as well. But yeah, this is such a fun conversation. Thank you so much for helping us understand somatic psychotherapy and what it is and what we can do in the moment.
Yeah, thank you. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, my absolute pleasure. Thank you guys for tuning into the show, listening throughout. I so appreciate you guys. It means so much to me that you do tune in and that we have this listener base and community. If you guys haven't, head over to Instagram. Make sure, like I said, you follow me, Natural Wellness Tips, head over and follow Aaron, The Soul Ride. And we would love to chat with you. Drop into our DMs, say hello, and we'll see you. Well, not Aaron. I'll see you next week on the podcast. Hopefully you'll see Aaron again on the podcast. But until next time, on whatever platform you are on, make sure you like, subscribe, leave comments, reviews, whatever you can, because it helps more people find this podcast. And it actually helps me get to know you guys better and show up better for you. So until the next episode, namaste.